Since 1948, the Israeli Defense Forces have operated under a mandatory conscription model, yet a specific exemption for full-time yeshiva students, known as the Torato Umanuto arrangement, has persisted. This policy, initially covering only 400 students, institutionalized the idea that intensive Torah study constitutes a form of national service equivalent to military duty. The legal basis for this mass exemption was formalized in 2002 by the Tal Law, which aimed to regulate the deferral system, but ultimately failed to integrate the Haredi population into the military or civilian workforce. This created a deep societal rift, pitting the principle of shared national burden against the Haredi commitment to religious scholarship as paramount. The number of annual exemptions now exceeds 60,000, placing immense strain on the concept of universal service. The Haredi community views military service as a direct threat to their way of life, fearing exposure to secular influences and disruption of their rigorous study schedule. Their leaders assert that the spiritual protection afforded by continuous Torah learning is the true defense of the State of Israel, a concept rooted in traditional Jewish thought. They argue that mandatory conscription would dismantle the yeshiva world, which they consider the foundation of Jewish continuity. Furthermore, many Haredi individuals lack the secular education required for effective integration into modern military roles, having focused almost exclusively on religious texts from a young age. This cultural separation reinforces the demand for blanket exemptions, treating the yeshiva as a protected national institution. Critics, primarily from the secular and national religious sectors, emphasize the principle of equality before the law, arguing that the current system unfairly burdens the non-Haredi population. They point out that while their children serve 3 years or more, often in combat roles, Haredi youth receive state subsidies while remaining exempt. This disparity is frequently framed as a violation of democratic fairness and a threat to social cohesion. The economic argument is equally forceful. Mass exemptions remove tens of thousands of potential workers from the tax base, placing a significant financial strain on the state budget. The demand is not necessarily for full integration, but for a meaningful contribution, either through military or national civilian service. The Tal Law, intended as a temporary solution, faced repeated challenges in the Supreme Court of Israel. In 2012, the court ruled the law unconstitutional, citing the violation of the right to equality. This repeal created a legislative vacuum, forcing the Knesset to repeatedly pass temporary deferral orders to prevent the immediate mass conscription of yeshiva students. These temporary measures, often attached to annual budget laws, maintained the status quo but lacked permanent legal standing. Each extension triggered renewed public outrage and further judicial scrutiny. The core legal problem remains defining a constitutional path that respects both the Haredi lifestyle and the fundamental principle of universal military service required by the security situation. In March 2024, the Supreme Court issued a critical ruling, confirming that the government lacked the legal authority to continue funding yeshiva students who were eligible for conscription but had not enlisted. This decision effectively ended the state subsidies for thousands of Haredi men, escalating the crisis from a purely military issue to an immediate financial one. The ruling mandated that the state must begin drafting Haredi men immediately, absent a new constitutional law. This judicial intervention placed immense pressure on the ruling coalition, which relies heavily on Haredi political parties, whose primary mandate is maintaining the exemption status. The government is currently operating under extreme legal uncertainty regarding enforcement mechanisms and budget allocations.
The economic cost of the current exemption system is twofold: direct subsidies and lost productivity. Direct state funding for yeshiva students eligible for the draft is estimated in the hundreds of millions of shekels annually. More significantly, the high birth rate within the Haredi community means that by 2065, they are projected to constitute over 30% of Israel's population. If current exemption rates persist, the military will face severe manpower shortages, and the national economy will struggle to support a large, non-participating segment of the workforce. This lack of participation contributes directly to high poverty rates within the Haredi sector itself. Integrating even a fraction of these men into the labor market or national service is essential for Israel's long-term fiscal stability and military readiness. Haredi political parties, primarily Shas and United Torah Judaism, hold significant leverage in the Knesset, often acting as indispensable coalition partners. Their participation is frequently conditioned on maintaining the draft exemption status quo. Any legislative attempt to enforce conscription risks collapsing the government, leading to immediate elections. This political reality creates a perpetual deadlock, where security needs and judicial mandates clash directly with coalition stability. The current government has repeatedly attempted to formulate compromise legislation that satisfies the High Court while retaining Haredi support, but these proposals are often criticized for setting unrealistically low quotas or containing loopholes that perpetuate mass deferrals. Recent legislative proposals have focused on establishing annual quotas for Haredi enlistment, coupled with financial penalties for yeshivas that fail to meet these targets. One prominent proposal suggested a gradual increase in the draft age for Haredi men to 35, effectively delaying service until they are established in families, while simultaneously setting a low annual recruitment threshold. Critics argue that these quotas are insufficient to meet the military's actual needs and merely serve as a political fig leaf. Alternative solutions include mandatory national civilian service for those not drafted, focusing on education, healthcare, or emergency services, thereby ensuring some form of contribution to the state.
The Haredi draft controversy is fundamentally a conflict over the definition of Israeli citizenship and the nature of shared national responsibility. The ongoing legal battle forces a confrontation between religious autonomy and democratic equality. Without a sustainable constitutional solution, the societal polarization will deepen, potentially undermining the legitimacy of both the military and the judicial system. The resolution requires a complex balance, respecting the Haredi commitment to study while ensuring that the burden of defense and economic participation is distributed equitably across all segments of Israeli society. The outcome will define the future relationship between religion and state in Israel.